If it continues on this trajectory, this goes down as the worst trade in NFL history if Deshaun Watson continues to look like the Deshaun Watson that we've seen in Cleveland right now. I mean, just look at his season-long props this year. Just 33.50.5 for passing yards. If you're talking passing touchdowns, just 18.5 for him. Those are the numbers that we have now for Deshaun Watson, a guy that got a massive amount of money fully guaranteed on his contract. They gave up a ton of picks. They mortgaged their entire future to bring in the guy that they thought in Cleveland was going to be the missing piece, was going to be the franchise quarterback, and he's looked like it's almost like if they did a football version of Space Jam and somebody lost their talents, Deshaun Watson would be one of the characters in that football version.
And I don't understand, we were talking to Danny, and he said that every quarterback besides Deshaun Watson has thrived under Stefanski. Like, I don't understand this regression for Deshaun Watson, because that tells me that it's not Stefanski. That tells me that it's Deshaun, right? If everybody else gets better and gets their value and their skills maximized, then you look at Deshaun. His last time he played in 2020 with the Texans, 4,800 yards, 33 TDs to 7 interceptions, quarterback rating of 112. Then you go to the Browns. Obviously, he's got the time of suspensions, so you can't really look at the touchdown numbers, or the yards. But like, his completion percentage went from 70% to 58%. His quarterback rating went from 112 to 79. Like, he's just never been the same dude. And then last year, which the only reason he didn't play a full season was because of injury, 61% completion percentage, 1,100 yards, 7 TDs, and 4 interceptions. Just abysmal stuff.
I did make a small little bet on the over on touchdowns. I put.
It is a low number.
At MGM National Harbor. Shout out to Chris there, actually.
Ding,
I got
ding.
$500 on over 18.5. I mean, he threw 7 touchdowns and 4 picks. He actually played decent. Remember, he got hurt against Baltimore. They won that game. They actually beat the Ravens 33-31. I had the under, unfortunately. But, he threw a pick, but he played much better in the second half. I think he was like 20 of 34 in that game. And then we found out he got hurt. He was out for the season. It's just, the mechanics have been pretty sloppy. I guess that happens if you don't play football for an entire year. I also think a lot of it was mental, because we, as a country, and probably rightfully so, canceled Deshaun Watson. I also think as a nation we're all rooting for Jameis Winston to steal his job. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I actually think Deshaun's going to ball out a little bit this year. By ball out, I think throw more than 18.5 touchdowns if he stays healthy. I mean, you have Jerry Jeudy now as a number 2 wide receiver. He's still only 26 years old. You have Moore. You have Amari Cooper, we think, unless they do make a trade, which they're out on Ayuk. But until he gets moved, you never know what's possible. Even if Chubb isn't ready for week 1, I like Jerome Ford enough until he comes back. David Njoku, with Stefanski moving him around a little bit, is a solid tight end. You can play him in the slot. I think Deshaun will throw 20 touchdown passes minimum. I think that's his floor. So I like that bet a lot. We've done a lot of these quarterback things, and there hasn't really been a bet that I would place other than all of Jalen Hurts overs. But yeah, man, I think Deshaun's actually going to go back. I don't know if he's ever going to go back to being himself. T brought up that last year he had with the Texans. I think that statistically was the best season a quarterback's ever had, where they didn't make the playoffs. He was so good that year that it was J.J. Watts last year, and they were walking off the field together, and he was like, "I'm so sorry. We wasted one of your good years." And I really liked Deshaun to that point, because remember, all the stories about Deshaun were he was this good dude. He took care of his family. At Clemson, I loved watching him beat that Alabama team, which was like an NFL team. Dabo called them the Michael Jordan of college football. Then we found out maybe not so great of a guy. And then I was kind of out on Deshaun, rightfully so. My biggest takeaway was, though, the first time we saw him come back in the preseason, he looked like a different dude. His mechanics completely changed. So you would hope, and we'll find out a little bit here in the next couple of weeks when we see him, you would hope that maybe he went back, worked with a quarterback coach. But he lost a ton of weight. Says he's motivated. He said he's tired of the BS or whatever the quote was. Well, you get the BS, man, rightfully so, because of what you did. But I do think that he throws at least 20.
Question for you guys. So, and I'll ask you too, Nick, but I know that Ryan has the over on his touchdown, so I am curious about this. They've got the 3rd toughest schedule this year. The Browns do. They have the NFC East. Pretty much all the NFC East teams can rush the quarterback. You've got a guy who's often injured, with pressure coming his way in the toughest, most nasty, most physical, most cheap-shotting division in all of football, Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh twice a year. 10 games of those 17, he could be running for his life. Did that factor in at all for you guys?
Yeah, a little bit, actually, because I like him going against the Giants secondary. The Giants pass rush, if Thibodeau stays healthy and Brian Burns stay healthy, that scares me a little bit. Deshaun, we also forget, is mobile. He can move around a little bit. So I think that he could clean up against them, and then I think he could clean up against the Commanders, unless that secondary is just significantly better. Now, also, like the Cowboys, I don't know what we're dealing with. I mean, he could kind of tear them up. The divisional games, I think you'll probably see like 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. I also think he's going to throw some interceptions. But, what really played into it is just I don't know when Nick Chubb's going to be Nick Chubb again.
But just your opinion at this point of what you've seen from Deshaun Watson with the Browns, and do you think we'll see growth and maybe him getting at least somewhat closer to what he was with the Texans?
So I do think that he has looked good in training camp, but I think you have to take that with a giant grain of salt. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, you mentioned him as the biggest question mark on the Cleveland Browns, and I would take it as far as he's one of the biggest question marks in the entire NFL with how good this Browns roster is. If he's really good, the Browns, in my opinion, are a Super Bowl contender. The rest of the roster is that good. But if Deshaun Watson is average or even slightly above average, they don't have that much talent to where they can still be in that echelon of teams. For me, I need to see it on the field because there is not precedent that I can find in NFL history for a guy to play 12 games in 3 seasons, have surgery on his throwing shoulder, and then return and play at a Pro Bowl level at that position. I've never seen it in league history. I cannot find an example of it. And that's what the Browns need. They need him to be somebody that has done something that literally no one else that I can find in NFL history has done. So until I actually see that happen in regular season games on the field, that's when I'll start to believe. But until then, I'm going to doubt him because I haven't seen him be a great quarterback since he was in Houston, and it's been a really long time since he was a member of the Texans.
Conversely, Jameis Winston is said to be looking kind of sharp in camp. If Watson doesn't look good or he goes down, are we optimistic that Winston is a viable option for the full season?
So I am optimistic about that, and it actually has nothing to do with Jameis Winston, and it has everything to do with Kevin Stefanski. Because if you look at Kevin Stefanski's history with quarterbacks in Cleveland, all of them have played some of their best football other than Deshaun Watson. You look at what Baker Mayfield was in the 2020 season, which was Stefanski's first year in Cleveland. He was awesome. And then, the injuries came the second year of that marriage, and he kind of fell apart. And then Jacoby Brissett was really actually pretty serviceable, pretty good. I thought played the best football of his career when Deshaun Watson was suspended. And then you go back to last year, what they were able to capture with Joe Flacco down the stretch of that season. I thought he was terrific under Kevin Stefanski. Maybe some of that magic could be something that Jameis Winston finds if he is called into action. But really, other than Watson, every quarterback under Stefanski has played, I think, above their head. Not saying that they've been superstars because I don't think any of them have been all that talented, but I think Stefanski has gotten the most out of those guys. And if Jameis Winston is asked to step into that role, I believe the same will happen because of Kevin Stefanski.